All right, well, Logan's dipping out, but welcome once again to Min to Max 20. Tonight we will be doing our second episode of Tavernside Talks, which we are excited to get into. This, the premise for this one will be conditions of combat. And our first episode was all about actions, and we had kind of realized that a lot of the action talk was kind of starting to bleed into combat in general. So we figured, well, we'll try to isolate that for that last episode. But now we're gonna kind of broaden our scope here and just talk about more things in regards to combat, just outside of actions, but then also kind of dabble back in and kind of speak to it as well. So welcome, and so I guess we'll just jump right into this. No reason not to. Okay, so I have an order of things for things I want to talk about, but we're going to jump ahead a little bit in my notes, which I will go ahead and pull up for the stream so you guys can kind of see it. There we go. Before we continue, 1 second, let me make sure audio and everything is...
Audio and everything is
like just
it better be working.
Just disappears.
Excellent. All right, let's do this thing. So the first thing, we're going to skip over this first massive paragraph, and we're going to jump down to 10-second rounds for combat. And all I put for this was, all I wrote out was, because it makes a lot of things make sense, smiley face emoji.
The inclusion of the emoji ties that together a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, I went to
very well stated there,
I went to go ahead and just type in like a smiley, like a normal keyboard smiley face, and it was like, you want to put an emoji, and I'm like, absolutely, I do.
Yeah. What do you mean, dude?
And so yeah, to just jump in, like, I just think that 6 seconds of combat, like, I think that can make a lot of sense in some ways early on, like level 1 to maybe 5, where like things aren't so crazy when it comes to action economy and just kind of like the kind of like having access to certain spells and like multi-attack and stuff. But I feel like once you start to get into the later rounds and later gameplay, 6 seconds, like your character is just going apeshit on your turn and like just going wild. And so I feel like a good kind of round number to bump it up to without going too long is 10 seconds. I also find, like, in my mind, this also kind of makes it so that like a concentration spell lasting 1 minute doesn't just last the entire round of combat, because 10 rounds of combat is like, I don't think I've ever gotten to 10 rounds of combat. I've scratched the surface of like 7 or 8, but like I've never gone 10 rounds. And so I do like that this kind of pushes that to where it drops that concentration from 10 rounds to 6 rounds. I also kind of like this too, because it also makes it so if you want to, if you kind of want to make it like a time trial, like, hey, you need to survive for a minute or a couple minutes, it kind of adds that little bit of time up, so you can actually have it run for longer and more time actually passes. Because if you were like, hey, survive for a minute, and with 6 seconds it's 10 rounds, but you could also do now survive like 2 minutes and it's only 12 rounds. It kind of brings that out a little bit. So, but y'all go ahead and whatever y'all think, jump in here.
Casting spells that cost a minute too. So if you go into an encounter where you want to do something like unlock the door, it's really tough in 10-round combats, because you're like, well, combat's not going to make it to that point, but the whole part of this combat is for us to get into this area, which means I need to cast a spell, which is going to take a minute. Exactly. And so a lot of the time that gets like muddled, or like combat just gets really like a slog, because you're like, okay, I'm literally just waiting for this one thing. And so yeah, casting spells on that I think makes a lot more sense too. Makes it more viable to cast longer spells.
I think another thing too is, obviously, we all know I'm a fan of being able to cast more spells. But another thing is, as we talked about like making bonus actions more meaningful, and especially when you give more time, just in the world, because mechanically, we talked about, just like minute concentration goes from 10 to 6 rounds. That isn't. I mean, there's certain situations where maybe that's a big deal, but even that, I think that's more of some like nitpicky.
Yeah.
For the most part, it isn't really changing how combat's flowing. But it does, like, if you want to also argue, it's like, oh, well, while reducing this, it's more reasonable to have bigger impacts from bonus actions in this type of this type of setting. I think that, like, pairing those two kind of rulings together would be pretty interesting.
Which one of the big ones we were talking about last time was administering yourself a potion in a bonus action, and that was kind of what this was kind of was brought up in our last episode because of this, was like the fact that you had that extra bit of time to make a bonus action to administer yourself a potion. Kind of makes it, this will actually like make that a little more viable than cramming it all together into just 6 seconds. So
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, I like the idea of 10-second combat. I don't know if I'd run it though.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. I mean, for one, I think it's a good idea, and I like it. I just don't know if I don't know. I guess part of it too is, as we talked about, I run a slightly different setting that's still based on D&D 5e, and it just has so much stuff and rulings in it to go through those rules, which I think in normal D&D would be a task too.
Right. Which, go ahead and explain
Star Wars one.
I was gonna say, yeah. Those who don't know, Connor runs a Star Wars 5e campaign, and so there's a lot. It's a lot more technical for sure. So I think that this would not necessarily work the best for that setting.
I think it could work. I am just saying, I know myself, and I wouldn't go and take the time to find every spell and every ability that's restricted to a minute. I wouldn't go through it, find all those things. So it'd be like anytime it came up, it'd be like a reminder, and have to put a sticky note on my monitor that says a minute, 6 rounds, not 10 type thing.
Yeah.
But I still like the idea of, again, the pacing that you're saying though for the 10-second rounds.
Yeah, and
the pacing naturally does feel better.
And I think that when I run my next arc, because Connor is currently running on our channel the Red Mire Hunt arc, which he's doing a fantastic job. Tune in Sunday.
Allegedly.
Yeah. But I think the arc after this one on Minute Max 20, I'm gonna definitely run with this ruling and see how it works. And obviously, if it's dog shit, then no harm, no foul. But I think that I've thought it over. Trying. Yeah, I try to think as logically when it comes to some stuff like this, just to think okay, what is this all like what is the full spectrum of what this affects? And generally, from what I've thought of, I think it'll only make things better. So.
Yeah, I like that. So, and again, I think as it was mentioned, time trials and things like that. Like Logan, you mentioned, if a certain character is restricted for doing something for a minute, it's not as a pain in the ass. Although it's gonna be a pain in the ass. That's normally the reason you're having to do it. But it's just a little bit. It's hey, there's only a couple more rounds of combat till you're freed up.
Yeah, or you're not stuck there forever.
6 rounds is doable. 10 rounds you're dead. No one's abilities will last you 10 rounds of combat, depending on the force that you're trying to repel. So it's just so.
Right.
I think 6 is
I don't know, man.
I think
Shield Master next to a Sentinel in a small hallway.
I think
use your concentration on spike growth. I don't know.
Oh yeah, okay. I think that through the Frost Trail arc, the Remoraz fight, I'm pretty sure that went. I think 7 to 8 rounds, and everyone was basically dead. So.
Destroyed by those things.
Oh, that was a good fight.
I think more people technically went down than there were people on the map. Because I went down once, and then the chief, I think, sprung back and forth between life and death 6 times.
Yeah.
I got one tapped right away, and then I think I went down one more time and came back up, and finally was just I'm just going to spend a turn dumping healing into myself really quick.
Yeah, I think if you factor out the Walian Oxes, I think more people died than there were in that encounter. Technically, if you count dropping to 0 at death, I think more people died.
I think you're right. I think that's true. Yeah. But speaking of which, unless someone else has anything else to speak to this, I do actually have a mechanic that I want to bring up for going unconscious in combat.
Please.
I
have one too.
Okay, great. So we'll kind of shift over to that. Yeah. So I'll read this over real quick. So I call it On Death's Edge. So I wrote, nothing invokes panic and a sense of urgency like having your character or a fellow party member fall unconscious in the heat of battle or during a perilous adventure. The stress builds as the party begins to frantically try to remedy this dire situation. The players making their death saving throws, hoping with all that they have that they succeed and that their character can pull through to find another day. Moments like these can be some of the most crucial parts of a campaign because the life of a party member rests in the balance. However, sometimes the actions of the rest of the party is dictated on how well the downed player is making their death saving throws. If they're constantly making successes, and the party feels that they have some breathing room and won't always rush to the aid of their companion. On the other side of the coin, if they aren't passing their saves, and that's when the party really starts to kick things into gear and do whatever they can to save their friend. Which is why I have to take on the rule that players don't make their death saving throws. The DM will make the saves for the character so that no matter the outcome of the roll, their sense of urgency to help a down comrade is always there. However, there is still a way that the status of the unconscious character can be monitored, and that can be done by the other party members that are in the vicinity. A creature can make a perception check as a bonus action for this, which is kind of giving agency to bonus actions, in order to try to ascertain the condition of an unconscious entity in its fight against death. Real quick break here. I will say, I know that we've done this ruling in the past, but we still had the player rule their death saves. They just didn't tell anybody, because I feel like when we actually put this into practice, it felt a little bit like, okay, now I'm just like, there's no, like, I'm no longer involved, which can feel a little bit shitty. At least rolling your own death saves at least feels like you're still involved.
Yeah, I was about to bring that up. I was like, because it's just nice to be like, okay, and even though I might be about to die, my dice could save me. They could love me and not just suicide me.
Exactly.
And I think we're all a little bit of dice gremlins too. So you're reaching for your favorite D20.
Exactly. The ones that'll save you.
Come on, baby. And I got 13. So that
there you go.
Of course,
one
I'd
success.
roll it. Then I'd be like, especially here, I'd like just shoot you a message real quick with a number.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
So you and I know, and like I know I'm down 2, up 1, and like this next roll could kill me, while the rest of the party's like, I want to beat the kobold's head in. As I'm just laying on the ground with like a lance through me, you know.
And then so just to quickly finish this off, so if you're within 5 feet of the unconscious creature, it's a DC 8 perception check, and then incrementally outside of 5 feet, within 10 feet, DC 10, within 15 feet, DC 12, within 20 feet, DC 14, within 25 feet, DC 16, within 30 feet, DC 20, and then outside of 30 feet, a creature cannot accurately discern the conditions of the creature. I didn't really explain necessarily what you would know. I feel like that's like the DM's discretion, like whether or not, like, if you just blatantly know the condition in the sense of like saves or fails, or if they want to like articulate like, oh, like there's a lot of blood, like they're definitely they're definitely dying, or okay, their body is managing to kind of recover. Like it's kind of whatever what the DM wants to do, whether it's storytelling or whether it's just blatant, like statistically this is what's like, this is where they're at. So
no, I agree with that. I remember when you first brought up this rule, I hated it because as a player, I'm like, no, but I want to know what my friend's doing. Like, but like now, especially playing with it a little bit, and like especially like leaning more, like from taking the game kind of a little bit further out of my perspective, taking more like the role playing out like element into it. It's like, I don't know how he's doing, you know, and like just kind of leaning in as like, hey, if someone's on the ground bleeding, that's like an urgent matter every time.
Right.
So yeah, I think now, especially player rolling it as we've started doing.
Yeah,
I like that really a lot more.
I think that really was the final tweak, which I'll even actually make a note here. Where was it? What do you think, Logan?
I think that having the check is good. I like having it also after you're a certain amount of distance away, not being able to see. I think certain races, it'd be a cool mechanic. Obviously, you play by ear with what you have, but like elves have better eyesight.
Like maybe Eagle Tome Barbarian or something.
Yeah, so it might just be any of the creatures or classes that get like enhanced eyesight. They could have a little bit easier of a check to it or something like that, or someone with like if you have blind sight, something like that could just override that, you know.
My only other thought there, which I think we're on the same track, is maybe a medicine check at a certain range instead of a perception check, just so like you could ascertain the situation, maybe, like, because if you're close enough, you could tell like, oh, this is like he's looking bad with your medical knowledge. Because obviously you're having to perceive, but
I kind of
like maybe
that.
Not from like on top of the hillock and looking downward. Is like I can tell by the way his legs in the air that he's gonna be fine.
He's gonna
but
be
like
good.
He's gonna be good. That's where you want your leg after getting struck by lightning, you know. But like a certain range, like a certain proximity, being able to use a medicine check like that. Well, mostly just because certain people, like clerics, you know, it would make sense for them to have some advantage or some proficiency, to use the game terms, in that.
Well, I kind of like that, and I like opening things up to multiple skill checks so that you broaden things, because because I feel like perception is one of those things that like notoriously players will take because it like is such a big aspect of like the majority of the game when it comes to just perceiving the world around you. But I do like that, you know, maybe you have high wisdom, because perception is a wisdom stat, but maybe you don't have proficiency in perception, but you do have in medicine. And I was actually going back to what you were saying when it comes to like maybe racial things, but the alert feat would be pretty cool. if like the alert feat automatically like, you know, like if you're within 15 feet, you just know, or like if you're within a certain amount of feet, or if your passive perception is high enough, you would discern these things within a certain amount for free, or for maybe the cost of reaction, or change up what it actually costs. Right.
Yeah. There's always like, because I usually say bonus action. You know, I think there's always, and I like using it as like, of someone's like backstory, someone's background, certain things like that. You can always like change, and it doesn't always have to be advantage. It doesn't have to be you can roll different die. It could be a reaction, and it could be, you know, as you said, the alert feat, something like that. I'm sure there's some form of like field medic feat that no one's ever taken because the party has a cleric. But
well,
but like maybe something like that.
I think there is. I'm pretty sure there's a feat where like you can use a medicine kit to actually heal people. I think isn't there a feat? Isn't that a feat?
It sounds like a feat they'd have.
And but like you just like don't. Oh, here we go. I pulled right to feats. Let's go.
Yeah, medic feat. It's the you have proficiency in medicine and the healer's kit if you're not already proficient. If a creature within 5 feet of you drops to 0 HP without dying outright, you may use your reaction to attempt to keep that creature conscious. To attempt
your action?
Your reaction.
That's pretty cool, actually.
Ooh, that's nice.
You may make a wisdom medicine check if the DC with a DC of 10 and half the damage taken. Alternatively, you may expend one of the uses of your healer's kit. If you have one on success, the creature regains 1 HP and is prone.
That's pretty cool.
Gotcha.
Is that source or is that homebrew? Because I just looked in the player's handbook. I don't think it's in there.
It might be like a Xanthar's or Volos.
Let me unearthed.
Oh,
okay.
Unearthed and Arcana. I still like it though.
Yeah, I do too. I think that's really cool to actually make medicine kits a little bit more viable.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you don't use your medicine kit, you have to use your bonus action instead of a reaction, and it just stabilizes them. So.
I think this is a similar thing I kind of realized when playing the Blade Singer. Just when you have different ways of approaching certain mechanics, it's like I don't think anyone would ever take that feat. Like if it was in the player's handbook, I can't see why somebody would, because if they were going to go that route, they'd play a cleric. But when you add this ruling to it, where you can't really tell what someone's health's at, and you can't really, and then you like reaction, especially when you don't have to use a bonus action because they're a little bit more prominent now. It's like, oh, this feat becomes really good, and the actual medicine kit, which people might have used once or twice, but everyone's just rolling with potions. Well, now that's a great thing to have on you. Maybe like you're rolling like a fighter, but now you're just like, you know, the paladin next to you gets dropped. You're just like, nope. Like, come on, buddy. Like, just slap a salve right on the open wound in his neck, and you're like, get back up here, buddy.
You got by their
there's a little bit of speed in it, buddy. Like, come on, you're gonna drop it. You're gonna drop it 3 rounds, but for those 3 rounds, you better be swinging.
Going back to the Goliath, the war leader, he just kept going down. Like, get back up.
Yeah, get back up, brother. Yeah, I think the diversity that would add to like character builds and stuff too, because then you're not just building clerics, or you're not just building this for your party. You're like, oh well, we're kind of missing this. We have a little bit of a like we have a lower level paladin that has some lay on hands but isn't really that great on healing, but then we also have our ranger who is really good at medicine because they've been on their own for so long or something, you know.
Yeah, it kind of gives more agency even to the medicine skill in general, because I feel like the medicine skill is only ever used to be like, yo, has this thing been dead, or like how'd it die, and you're like, roll a medicine check. That's like it, or to stabilize a creature. But it's like very far and few between, where I feel like medicine is such a wide range of like potential. Like it's almost like the middleman between like magical healing and health potions and like just straight up like bandages and stuff, which, you know, is pretty underutilized in D&D as a setting.
I think it'd be funny to have a cleric that has no healing magic. Just take all the offensive, all the buffing things. Like, I need a heal. It's just like, all right, 1 minute, I got some ibuprofen. Like, he's rolling up. My man's rolling up with gauze and stitches. Like, I'm gonna get you. It ain't gonna be good, but I can get you.
That'd be awesome.
More morphine.
Connor, did you have something on this, or was this pretty similar to what you were thinking?
No, it is kind of, and I know we talked about getting into the conditions thing a little bit, but it does play on that same ruling, and it is a house rule. I told you guys a little bit for the Redmire hunt, and we can get into it for beginning of next session, going over some of the little house rules we're going to play with. Yeah. But I like the rule, and give credit where credit's due. This was a rule that was used in a Crown of Candy for Dimension 20. But the poison condition, on top of changing a couple other things, I like it doing it where it death saves, if you still have the poison condition, you still
right.
get a roll for it top of your turn, but you're rolling your death saves with disadvantage, which is nasty.
Yeah, which is
horrible.
tough.
And talk with your players before doing it. But
yeah.
for a certain type of game, like that's the environment you want.
Yeah.
Which in this particular case, I do want that.
You want your friends to hurt? I get you.
I do. Yeah, I really do. With their permission.
Yeah,
but,
we'll sign the legal waiver. So.
Yeah. The screwed up thing is, like, I get monetary value for killing your characters, and I don't know why you guys didn't read that, but I appreciate you signing it.
Yeah.
But I think certain rules, I think they're like just that. Like death saves are normally a very like. There's not like you don't get to add your constitution, you don't get to add your proficiency. It's just like it's just a straight across rule, and I like that, but it's having special exceptions because I don't see why there can't be a certain thing like. Maybe a certain aura, like maybe you don't have concentration on bless, but somebody else does, and bless is a really good spell. But like you get something to give you advantage on that roll too.
Well, I just find it
something more mundane, but
I do find it interesting that your constitution does not go into your death saves. Yeah, I find that interesting that it's purely a roll, which is like I understand, but it's also like constitution is so underutilized generally anyway. Like when it comes to just like it's like hit points. And then like anything cold, or like or like becoming exhausted. That's usually when it's used. Or like if like you make your players roll for being drunk or whatever. But I feel like con would be I feel like would be a lot more of like maybe like a little bit more like of a powerful thing to have. Not even necessarily just because like you get more health, but also because you know when it does come down to just rolling for your life, you get that little buff.
I would say go ahead before I get into that.
No. I'm just agreeing with it. I think con not being used for your death saves is very interesting. Not even just a Constitution save, but just Constitution based, because you add it to everything else, health related. So it doesn't make any sense that it's not added to that. It could be like, well, it's your will to live instead, and then it should be wisdom if not Constitution.
Right. It should be something, a stat.
It should be something rather than just nothing.
I like adding that as long as there is a give take, because my first thought was, man, like if someone makes a good barbarian, or I heard an alternate rule which I haven't tested, but like letting sorcerers use their concentration as their spellcasting modifier, because it's like that's a whole other thing. But anyway, it's like like adding con would be really good. But then I'm like, well, I like that because like you may have a +5 to your death saves now. As long as soon as you get up, any other time during the day, you no longer have to hit a 10, you got to hit a 12. You go down again, now I got to hit a 14. You get up again, now I got to hit a 16. Like if you're limboing between life and death like that, and you're getting your proficiency, or maybe you're just getting the straight across ability modifier, great. But there has to be a little bit of like, yeah, you can't.
No, I got you.
There's gonna be a certain amount of.
And I kind of like that actually. Like I like the fact that like there's that reoccur, because actually this kind of goes into one of my other mechanics that I actually have real quick. And I'll just read it. And I earlier when I was going through my notes, I called it hardcore mode. I had it be carryover damage. Where, long story short, when you hit 0, you don't just hit 0, you actually go into the negatives, and you have to heal back up out of the negatives so that before you become conscious again. Because in my mind, it can be kind of weird, like just storytelling kind of world-wise, like that you can suffer a massive blow, and then like all it takes is 1 point of like lay on hands to get you back up, you know? I feel like to get hit that hard, I feel like would require more healing to get you back up to conscious. But I do like, I don't know. That's why I call it hardcore mode, because I feel like it'd be pretty crazy if you get like 30 points of damage and now you're at negative like 5 or 10. Because I had it written where it's oh my gosh, excuse me.
Bless you.
Thank you. I had it written where
hands.
I had it written where you calculate the damage that carries over past 0, divide the number by 4. So say you get. You take like you go past 0 and there's 4 leftover hit points, you're at -1. So that way you're not just taking it all, but there's a little bit of something.
Okay, I feel like, especially with my like added up the DC.
Yeah.
Between that and hardcore mode, I do almost feel like you'd have to pick one, unless you just want to you want to make it rough, which is a version of that game too.
Yeah.
But yeah, the only thing there, I think you do have to. Like with hardcore mode, especially if you're doing like, hey, if it goes negative past your max, you're dead. I think it would be, you would at least have to be intentional about like, hey, like your real HP is at -2, but your actual death threshold is at -8. You know, like, because unless you want to give a lot of grace to that, but like if you get wombo combo smited, you had 2 health left and it like would clock you, like.
Well, exactly,
you know.
and I think exactly, but obviously a lot of this stuff you want to talk to your players. So I feel like in some ways it's like there's times where you want to be like, "Yo, let's play nitty gritty, hardcore." Like my character could get like his head cut off, but then there's other times where you're like, "Yeah, I kind of don't want to like be like worried every combat encounter that my character's gonna get smoked." Yeah. But I think it'd be cool.
Roll on the wound table. You died instantly.
Yeah. I think it would be cool to kind of to play into this a little bit, because I think if you're at 1 hit point and someone comes up and just stabs you in the chest again, and you take 30 points of damage, but you're technically you don't outright die, but you're at -29. It's like, but really all you do is go to 0. It just kind of makes it seem a little bit less meaningful, in the sense of like massive amounts of damage output.
Right. No, I get that.
You could also do it so someone either makes a con save or a check for the spell, whatever they're making, and then like say the player that's down makes a Constitution save if they don't get all the way up to 0 HP, and that's just like they go back to 1 HP instead. Wow. Okay, let's do so. For the effect, it's like you go -20 under, right? And you get healed for 8 or something. That technically wouldn't put you up because that doesn't put you back to 0 before you go up. But say you made an insanely hard DC Constitution check, then you just come back up at 1 HP. Where the healing didn't do all the effects it needed, but the wound didn't kill you, like, put you down permanently. So if you
just like muscle through it at that point.
You get stabbed in the kidney, you shouldn't be able to get back up. You just get up and you have kidney failure, man. It doesn't matter. I'm gonna keep going with a 1 HP.
Yeah. I'm either gonna get healed in 5 minutes or I'm gonna be dead in 5 minutes. We're about to find out. Yeah. I'm gonna be swinging all the while.
Yeah, I think there's actually a lot that we could really do with this whole like portion of the game.
The only thing you absolutely cannot do is add everything we just talked about to the same game.
Exactly.
Because 100%. It's like, all right, you died. Here's the 5-page tier of what that means. Here's the intro. Here's a little bit of world lore of why you're especially fucked.
You hand them a PDF, like a whole book, like, okay, this is now what you're doing. Now you're fighting for your life. And they're like, why am I reading 16 pages?
It's actually a mini game where you're in limbo between life and death, and you have to play a poker game against God and the devil, and
you're playing Flappy Bird. If you don't get to level 20, you just die.
Yeah, you're pretty much playing Deep Rock Galactic.
Yeah, you're just playing Jumpy Boots or whatever, Jetty Boots. Okay, all right. I think we should move on from unconscious to unconscious. So, anyone else have a mechanic or something that I know, Logan? You said you have a couple. So,
taking aim and taking
actions.
Cover as mechanics. So for combat, I think, as a part of your movement, if you move to something behind cover, say you have something that would give you quarter cover normally, if you use your movement and bonus action to do something like take cover, you could instead lay behind it to gain better benefits from the cover.
So different than like choosing to go prone, but choosing to take cover.
But choosing to take cover. So instead you're like, okay, I'm going to spend my bonus action to get a little bit more behind this table or something like that, or get myself in a little bit better position. Obviously you can't do that with everything, but sometimes there's like half walls that are broken that would give you quarter cover for being in one spot, but if you use your bonus action after you fire a shot to take cover, you would have full cover.
I like that actually a lot.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that.
Yeah.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because I was actually going to say, I feel like cover in D&D is widely known but very underutilized.
Right.
And so having something where you could like move and you can do something where you gain the benefit of cover, because sometimes you're in a bar, you're firing across at some other patrons with a bow or something, you're like
every time you're in a bar.
Exactly, man. And there's these tables in front of me, well, I'll just use my action to flip the table, my bonus action to take cover behind it, and then that gives like a reason to have cover rather than just, oh, well, I'm standing next to this thing. In the home game, the pillars we were in a bar and there was pillars around me and I was just standing next to it, so I got the benefits of cover, but I didn't do anything to get the benefits of cover.
Right.
I kind of like it being more of an intentional thing than you just being like, I'm standing here. And then it's kind of like, oh, well, like, okay, let's look. But it's like, okay, but also like, I mean, line of sight could obviously negate this if a creature moves, but it's like you are intentionally like rested up against something. Because I feel like the benefits of cover are pretty great. And so putting it into a reaction or an action or bonus action I think is too much. But yeah, putting it into one of those categories does make it so, does kind of give you that bonus, but at a cost. And I think it also kind of opens things up where, like you're saying, like it kind of makes your character be like, okay, I can do this as an action. Let me kind of look at the terrain and be like, oh, can I use these bushes as something, or can I use this tree? Like, everything is a little bit more like like you can make that attempt, and maybe even you can make them roll for it or something, or I don't know. But you could like maybe if things are a little bit more like if things are a little bit harder to get behind, maybe you can make them make a roll. But I like that.
I'm very curious now what the take aim action is, because I really like the cover one.
Yeah.
What's the take aim? Because I'm liking the idea so far.
Take aim would be something that you could do where you sit down. So say you have a bow that fires with disadvantage after a certain range. Part of the benefit to that would be you take a little bit of time. You don't extend your range all the way, but you could take half of what's in between there and extend your range a little bit. Or if you're taking a little bit extra time to take aim, you are like, I'm going to not shoot twice this turn, but instead I'm going to spend the time to take aim because I have the sharpshooter's feat, which gives me a -5 to hit. But if I take the time to take aim, then I'm only gaining 1 attack, but you gain the benefits of like, I'm not as constrained by my bow. I'm not stuck here.
Yeah.
Because spells don't ever have a maximum.
A minute max.
It's not like, you can fire Firebolt 60 feet or 120 feet.
Min the max.
Which I think it should, frankly. Because I feel like you lob a fireball, at a certain point physics takes place. And
yeah, the fire disappears. So,
I agree.
Yeah, having something with a bow where it makes it, because like I very rarely you see people use bows in a lot of camp. Like I mean, ours personally, we very rarely have people who use bows. It's more of, well, if I'm gonna play Ranger Man, I'm just gonna Gloomstalker Assassin and sneak behind someone.
And you should.
Fiend, bro. Fiend.
Where my mind went with it, and tell me how you feel about this as like a other option for the take aim, is I like the, because as soon as you said someone takes cover and you mentioned a bar setting, I'm just imagining it's like a Western shootout essentially at this point with his nose, and taking aim I thought would be like really cool if you're like calling your shot essentially, like on that, it's like not hex, right, but it's a version of just like mechanically like I'm going to take my time to aim at him, and you're either however mechanically you want to do it, you want to raise your to hit with that, or you want to lower their AC specifically to you, just something like they're taking cover, you're like trying to like wing them in the shoulder because they have quarter cover, to something where, because D&D you can use a lot of like, there's a lot of genres and stuff people draw from, and my favorite, no matter what game I'm running, is you got to get a little Western in there, shootouts, quick draws, whatever you can do. If it's with a crossbow, if it's with a bow, if it's with fucking magic, but like diving behind cover, flipping over the table, I like all those a lot. And even the extending the range on that still fits that theme too. Man's running away on a horseback. He's like, yeah, give me a minute.
Well, I really like that too, because I think that's cool, because there even is in like the player's handbook, they talk about what you can do. You can do like a shove or a trip or whatever in replace of an attack action, but that's usually generally saved for melee. So I like that this opens up the ability to kind of break up your attack actions and use it for like a ranged benefit, instead of it always being like, because I think literally I should have just left my book open. It's like let's see, where is it? It's, you can do two different. I want to say it's shove and trip. Yeah, so using the attack action, you can use a special melee action to shove a creature, either to knock it prone or push it away from you. No. So it's like one and the same. So you can either shove it away or knock it prone using this extra action. So I like that. And I think it's a cool way because I think it's a cool way to kind of, flavor being able to kind of break that range a little bit. So I like that a lot.
Yeah, I like that too. Anything that makes melee combat, as we talked about last time, more diverse. But also, there is still, there could be a similar monotony with firing a bow over and over. Similar, so having just more little things you can do with it. Little actions, little bonus actions, like firing. Pretty much both actions you pointed out, Logan, I like them a lot. And I would probably steal and use both of them.
Yeah.
And by probably, I mean I'm going to.
Oh yeah.
I'm gonna say it was my idea, and you're not allowed to call me out on that.
Oh shit.
But
he said,
so, yeah, I came up with it, guys. You can't prove me otherwise. Don't you dare show me that video.
Yeah, I think that's part of what made me think about it too, was playing the Star Wars home game that we were playing. Like, ranged combat was a lot more prominent, but ranged combat, it became the swap for melee. Like, people who are just firing their guns are just firing their guns kind of deal.
Right.
So,
yeah, anything to, like, mix up, because either one gets repetitive. Swinging swords can get repetitive. Firing weapons gets repetitive. A lot of that comes down to, you know, player and DM's creativity, but also these rules like this, where it's like, the obvious choice is to shoot. Well, now you have other options with just pew. It's like, oh, I want to pew. Or
I kind of also like the idea of maybe doing something similar in the sense of maybe being able to do specific shots. Like if you shoot someone in the hand, you can disarm them. You shoot them in the leg, you can make them like not run as much. Shoot them in the throat, maybe it makes you do like +5 or +10 or something.
Right.
Something that I was watching XP to level 3, and he was going through all the Unearthed Arcana, and what they're doing now with Rogue, I don't know if you've seen it, but what they're doing with Rogue is that you can now forego sneak attack dice to add special like abilities. So you can get so if you have 3d6 sneak attack damage, you can get rid of 2d6 of that sneak attack damage and do like a mechanic, and that might be like disarm or something. So it's really cool, a really cool way to give rogues maneuvers, but it still kind of takes away from their own kind of pool. It's not like what I do with fighters and give them maneuvers. It kind of like makes them, because if you gave a rogue maneuvers, they're just broken. Like they can do sneak attack and then they have, but like I feel but I feel like if you them kind of taking away from that pool of like damage, but they're able to do things kind of unique, that's really cool. So I like this idea of being almost like kind of giving ranged weapons almost this little bit more expanded mechanic, which I will say, right. The next edition, I want to say they're actually expanding heavily on weapons. And so because obviously I feel like in general, this, 2014 5e, the weapon's a weapon. And I think that in this newer edition coming out, they are like, okay, like they're trying to bring up martial classes by also bringing up like physical weapons, like with them.
Which I think is a great idea, only because it's good to have all your mechanics tied to your person. But I, as a DM, I think we could all agree, having it tied to an item that can be taken away at some point, not to like screw over your players, but like create situations like you're disarmed, because I'm a big believer in most anything a player can do, an enemy can do.
Exactly.
Yep. Yeah. So like having that is like, oh, I have like a +8 to hit. Well, 3 of those are from your sword, and they just use a targeted attack, which I think we spoke about last time too, like upping the AC to do specific attacks to certain parts of the body. They just do that, and now you're disarmed. And there's also an arrow through your wrist, which isn't ideal either. But just things like that, anything to pretty much make situations more complex, I think is it. Like there could be bloat, but like giving them more options where situations have more solutions than just, like maybe it's like, there's a little footwork, just anything to add more to it than I'm gonna punch him hard.
Yeah, exactly.
But also making punching them hard viable. You always want to be able to punch someone and get a good result out of that.
Exactly. So I'm looking forward to all that too. I like those though, Logan. That's pretty sweet, man. Really expanding upon range, because that's actually something I did with. I added great bows to the game, which gives instead of bringing up like ranged weapons to being 1d10, I have a great bow which is 1d12. It has a strength requirement, but it makes it so that you can still have that threshold of damage even go up, because some a martial fighter can be, or like melee can be like, oh, so I take the great axe 1d12, my damage output goes up high, but then like bows are pretty set in like that d6 to d10 range, where it's like I kind of wanted to expand that, like you can increase that even a little bit more.
I think I remember you and I, when I first started making my campaign, very first campaign way back when, we ended up talking for a long time, you and I, Jared, about like different types of arrow types, different types of shield types, different types of bow types.
Oh, right, yeah.
Stuff like that. Yeah, which, I mean, I think the great bow is a great thing that came out of that, but also just like, there's a number of things, as you said, hopefully they make the equipment and weapons better in the D&D 1 or whatever that final name ends up being.
Right. And by the way, when you were for last Sunday, when you mentioned broadheads and barbed and stuff, are you using the mechanics that I put in the okay? I was like, okay.
That was a nod. That was a very purposeful nod.
I was like,
yeah.
Okay, yeah. Because I even went back in the Discord and I was like, did I post those mechanics? And I saw them there. I was like, I know. Yeah. I really like those. I think adding different arrows is really cool. And I think there could even that list that I've already made can be heavily expanded upon too, which would be pretty cool.
Right, and it's a thing that makes sense, just because even hunters have different types of bows, different types of heads, and it's a way to just like make again ranged combat be more complex than linear. It's like I'm gonna shoot him. So what are you gonna shoot him with?
Exactly.
That's
exactly.
A gun is the option at the time.
Yeah, you pull the gun.
Yeah.
What's up, Logan?
I really enjoyed the different types of arrows and stuff is very nice. That's one thing that not D&D related, but game related. Legend of Zelda has a very like linear path, except for that's one of the only like different damage types you can get is small elements. What I really like from Star Wars as well is the keywords you can get on weapons, like vicious and brutal and stuff. Because that allows you to make a weapon unique and a little bit stronger, without busting it by being like, well, instead your longsword does 1d6 and 1d10 now rather than just 1d10. Because
hey, shout out to the first game I ever ran, and yeah, we did that. When I first started playing D&D way back when, I scaled everyone's weapons. Don't do that. I literally was handing out 2d6 short swords just because I thought that's how D&D worked, and you scaled like a video game. And I was Connor after that was like, by the way, I was looking at rules, and a long sword's a long sword. Like, you don't, like, unless it's magical, you don't just scale it.
I remember I went on like Reddit and like, hey, so we used to do weapons like this, but I'm reading this. What should I do about it? And the consensus for every comment was apologize to your players and take their toys away. That game is not made for that. Like,
that's so
buddy,
funny.
you can't. I was like, guys, I'm sorry. I think we did a fun thing with that. I think I ended up making some of the weapons from that like cursed, like that. They were so good, they ended up being like problematic. You know, because it's a world. They exist in some capacity. I don't think we made like, oh, your weapons turned to dirt and there's new weapons next to you. I didn't think we went that far, but you know,
you should have.
Yeah.
You should have made it blow up.
Dirt in their taverns.
But I think having minor keywords like that is very good, because then it's like, oh well, I can get a very like nicely weighted short sword that has a good crossguard or something like that.
Yeah, another thing, and again, just the actual name of the setting is Star Wars 5e. It's a free thing to use because it's a Disney product, and if you try to monetize that, they'd be sued to hell. But it's a lot of things they do with it that I like are making it like there's so many. For one, there's way too many weapons if we're being honest, and then the customizations you can get on weapons. And again, it's a game about guns for the most part. There's swords and lightsabers, but looking at like things, especially it's already a 5e, like it's made based off D&D 5e. Taking small things they do to like certain weapons and swords wouldn't be a bad idea as a DM or as a player asking your DM to like, I like this. Could I take my sword to a blacksmith, or could I request a blacksmith to make me a sword that has certain properties like that? So that way, as you're saying, you take a long sword and you want it balanced, or you want it weighted on a fret, or however you want to flavor it to get certain little properties. Like in that setting, I'm pretty sure it's certain things like your critical threshold goes from 20 to 1920, and like you can put certain effects on people, yada yada, and of course use your discretion adding them to your game. But they're options. Yeah,
I think it'd be cool, and I do think like part of me like just with just watching people like go over the new Unearthed Canon, like part of me like kind of is reeling in a little bit of the homebrew that I'm doing, like not trying to type out too much stuff to see what this new content is, because if they cover a lot of that stuff and they just put it into the game, I'm not going to sit here and spend hours and hours and hours and hours, you know, when they literally, you know, have the platform to play test and fine tune those things. So
that's an important thing too. Yeah. Playing with homebrew, I think an important thing is changing fringe rules and certain things like that is always going to be somewhat easier than changing fundamental rules.
Right.
Because I don't think, especially like if you change like a small thing, like you would make dexterity somehow stronger. That's going to affect so many unexpected things in your game just because so many things build off it. But if you're changing a rule all the way out here, it kind of lives in its own world. Like, for instance, like scoping in with your bow. It might affect certain subclasses and stuff, but for the most part, you have a good idea of how that's going to affect your game.
Exactly. All right. Shall we move on to critical hits?
Hey, we kind of talked about it anyway. Yeah.
I'm curious to see what you have for this.
Okay, so I was watching one of the YouTube video out there, and they had mentioned this ruling, which I really liked actually. But as I was typing it out, I was realizing some things which we'll discuss. But let me go and read through it. So, critical hits, and this is for weapons, like melee weapons, ranged weapons. The glorious feeling of landing a critical hit can be exhilarating and easily turn the tide of battle, depending on the outcome of the roll. Nothing feels worse than scoring a critical hit on an attack and rolling a 1 on the damage die just to double it to 2, or rolling low overall if you choose to roll an additional damage die. Because of this, there will be a new method in which critical hits can be resolved for weapon attacks. By the way, that actually... That was worded initially, it will be, and I was like, hold on. When I was going through it, I was like, no. We should add it to the pool, not like cement it in. But then, when scoring a critical hit, the weapon's normal damage is automatically maxed out, combined with another roll of the weapon's damage die. So let me give an example. So, a creature wielding a dagger with a dexterity modifier +2 scores a critical hit on a target. The initial weapon damage of the attack instantly maxes out to 6. Because the D4 is automatically a 4 plus the 2 at 6, but then they also get added an additional D4 of damage on top of it. So it maxes out the initial, and then they get to roll another one, and that's how it plays. If the weapon deals any additional damage, such as a magical weapon imbued with fire properties that add 2d6 fire damage, the initial 2d6 fire damage immediately becomes 12 and adds another damage die 1d6 to the total. This ruling will make critical hits feel more consistent, more impactful and lethal on the battlefield for both players and the creatures they face. I'm not even at spells yet. Hold on.
Oh my god.
Really quickly, before you go to spells, I have run this mechanic in my games, and it does feel good, and it still feels like you're being rewarded for it without scoring a critical and being like, oh yeah, I rolled a 2. But then it also doesn't feel like it's too crazy because you don't see crits that often, and if you do see a crit, then it's like, I mean, they deserve this. This is a decent amount of damage, but this is a deserved decent amount of damage.
Exactly. When I was thinking about this, I was like, that's pretty crazy. But then I'm like, dude, how often do you actually roll critical hits necessarily? Hold on. Let me get the spells. Okay.
I know what character I'd make with these mechanics.
Okay,
sure.
Scoring a critical hit on a spell attack can certainly cause a high damage output and change the tide of battle, as long as the dice rolls cooperate, similar to weapon attacks. If the rolls for the spell's damage are consistently low, then that tremendously downplays the severity of the critical hit. Because of this, there'll be a new method in which a critical hit's damage can be resolved for spell attacks. When scoring a critical hit, the spell automatically does maximum amount of damage possible, adding an additional damage die roll to the total. A creature casts the spell Guiding Bolt and scores a critical hit on a creature. The 4d6 radiant damage immediately becomes 24, adding an additional 1d6 point of damage to the total. This ruling will make critical hits feel consistently more impactful and lethal in the battlefield for both players and the creatures they face. Now, and I was thinking about this because spells was a little bit tricky because I was like, okay, like, how do I want to do this? And I toyed with it, and then I came to this conclusion because I was thinking mainly in the realm of spells. This, though, yes, on average, it'll make it so your critical hits do more. However, if you were to roll max damage and double it for a Guiding Bolt, so say for that 4d6, you rolled all 6s, you'd actually be doing 48 points of damage. And so, for this ruling, it's like you're almost taking like the middle ground a little bit. It's like you're taking that that damage cap almost, foregoing the max amount you could do by doubling, but obviously that statistically is a lot less likely, but you are foregoing something by taking this option.
I think so too, yeah. Again, it is averaging out damage. You're getting a big reward for damage, but it's like a guarantee. When you roll a crit, you're guaranteed a set number, at least, for both these.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's where I think that I find it to be, and I was actually thinking too, because I was like, dude, if you score critical hit on a spell, it's just so much damage. But then you also got to realize, like, generally spells you're casting 1, which just kind of goes back to you're like, can I cast 15 spells, Connor?
Yeah, you can every time, buddy.
No.
Take a little fairy dust, cast haste on yourself. That's one of your spells, but
you have 6 more. Don't worry, little Timmy. You can do whatever you want. Your heart desires.
Go ahead and roll death save so you can cast all of them, buddy.
But I was thinking, because like, yes, the damage output is obviously like comparatively going to be a little bit less for marshals, but marshals usually have more attacks, therefore the probability of getting more critical hits is higher. Therefore, like, if they get two, and usually marshals are the ones where you can score a critical hit on a 19 or an 18, and that's usually more manipulated by marshals. Whereas usually spellcasters, it's usually always capped at 20, unless there's a subclass somewhere that is just busted as fuck.
I don't think there is.
And then I was also
know.
yeah, and I was also keeping into the count just like spells. Generally, I would say, I mean, this is a rough statistic. I would say more often than not, spells usually cause an effect based off a saving throw, and you can't crit on a saving throw.
Yeah.
And so, now also keep in mind that if you were to do Disintegrate and roll a critical hit on a Disintegrate, you would be capping out immediately at 100 points of damage, which would be absolutely insane.
It's pretty much like if you crit on that, you just cast Power Word Kill on an area.
Yes, because it's 10d6, and so you max out at 60. Plus, oh no, I think it's 20. I don't think it's 40. I think it's 20. So you'd be, let me look it up. I think Disintegrate is 10d6 plus 20, unless I'm mistaken.
I certainly do not know.
Oh wait, no, it's plus 40.
Plus 40. So yeah, you would essentially, but that's one of those things where it's like, I mean, that's a 6th level spell. It's also a critical hit. If you miss, it's no damage. So I feel like, you know, in some ways it does, like, dude, I don't know. Sometimes you just got to be like, that's crazy, and just also got to realize that this goes both ways. If a creature casts a Disintegrate on you, like, rip, GG's.
Yeah, because you're too rude.
I like that. It goes both ways.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I like this mechanic. I think we should use this mechanic.
I would immediately make an Elven Gloomstalker Ranger Assassin Rogue. I would use the Brutal property on my bow. I would just sit back. I would have a familiar with me to give me the help action. Then I'm rolling pretty much advantage plus another die. Anytime I can. My crit range is 19. I would try to obliterate this mechanic. But I would also make a character pretty much based on I need a crit.
Yeah.
Like, I'm still going to do damage, but like, I'm going to go hard my first round. Then please don't touch me. I'm scared. Like, I'm like, nobody throw rocks at me because God knows you're gonna crit because karma. Like,
well, and I like this because I think that critical hits, I think, should be impactful. Critical hit, in my mind, if you hit a natural 20, bro, you're hitting someone in the neck and like you're like clapping them immediately, or you're hitting something crazy. Like if you hit a critical hit and you're like, bro, I rolled a 1, it's 2. It's like so dumb. It's so lame. It's so aggravating.
I will say I naturally gravitate towards the more chance side of D&D. So I like, but also it feels so bad as a player. But I like, you gotta crit, and then there's a lot wider range of the numbers you can hit. But I fully understand that I am in many ways the minority there, and especially if you're running a game, you don't want to be like, your players can't, like, say someone gets like 2 crits at a combat or something, which is bonkers. And it's statistically completely improbable. But if they do that, then like they have a 2d4 weapon, and it's like, well, I got like a 3-1 that first roll, then I got like a 4-1 the next roll. Like, all right, well, like,
yeah,
yay,
exactly.
It's really not doing a ton.
Well, and that's, I was gonna say, and that's why another reason why I mentioned like. It's another way to do it, and I think this will be consistently like a more like people would choose this more often. But sometimes people want to be like, "Yo, I want to roll. I scored a critical hit on my guiding bolt. I want to roll 8d6. That's fun. Like even if I do like a little bit of damage, rolling that dice is a lot of fun. Or I just want to because what I like about this is it doesn't max out. Like if you were to roll really high and double it, it would technically beat this. Because like for instance, if you were to roll really high and double Disintegrate, you could break 120. You could definitely get very you could actually if you rolled really well you could break
like 140.
Yeah, because if you had the plus 40, you could get much higher. But this kind of makes it so like in general, if you're just like cool, I want to do damage, like or maybe like I score a critical hit, this enemy's on the cusp, but we're not quite there, and then you just want to take this ruling, then you can maybe finish them off. It kind of gives you that like ability to okay, do I want to try to risk it for a lot of damage, play a little bit safe. Or like, hey, I'm just gonna roll a bunch of dice because I have 10,000 sets of dice because I'm a gremlin. These roll.
That makes sense. I didn't realize. Go ahead, please.
another ruling that I did is you can do something important. You can forego the extra damage for a critical hit, and say you hit someone's armor, you can permanently reduce their AC by 1.
Oh
But
yeah,
you don't
that's
take the extra damage whatsoever, and I like that as a ruling too.
Yeah, you like
that one's really nice. Yeah,
that's
like
really
you cut
cool.
like part of their buckle and their shoulder pauldron comes off or
Yeah,
something.
it comes off because sometimes like I've had fights where it's been like really long drawn out combats, and just 1 minus AC would be super helpful, and so being like, well, I'm gonna forego, maybe dealing 100 damage with this, and instead I'm going to like absolutely obliterate one of their knees so they're slower or something.
That's super
like
cool,
that.
actually. Yeah, I like that a lot too. I like that table. Like
Yeah,
making a table,
especially,
things.
yeah, like doing the called shot type thing. Like if you have that pre-built mechanic and everyone understands it, it's like, hey, which one of these do you want? Like if you want to, you know, maybe it's like a better effect than if you would have called the shot. Or honestly, maybe you called the shot and then you critted on it, which would be bonkers. And then it's like, all right, like adding just like extra die, extra things to that. Yeah, I think anything, because again, I didn't realize as you were making this critical like damage table, it's like, oh, which one do you want? Like the normal way or this way? Because having that is like, I got a crit like pick. It's like, like, which one do I want? You know, like I know if I had that, my character would have like the math built out right there of like probabilities. Like, which one do I want?
Well, and I like that too, because I think like this gives more options. It takes a thing that, you know, because I never like to necessarily be like, oh, hey, we're ruling all critical hits are double dice, like, or double damage. I like to do it like if someone like sometimes I'm like, bro, I want to roll more dice. Fuck it, and you know, it's more fun. So that's why I like the ever kind of, you just choose one of the 3 options that you like and boom, or you know, or do the thing Logan was mentioning where you get like deke some armor, or chip something, or you know. Pretty cool,
right?
So
I think chipping armor in general is like a thing that should be, especially when it comes to like boss fights, especially letting marshals have the ability to do that to certain even creatures. Honestly, if you want to get crazy with it, I think that's always a fun thing to do.
Yeah,
just allowing that, and again, mechanically, it would be a little bit of thinking and probably troubleshooting to figure out how you want to incorporate that, but like. Yeah, if you want to like cut in a certain way to like remove like the carapace from, I don't know, let's say Remoraz. Or you like, or you know, like you use like maybe like you use the disarm, but you're like he can keep his sword all he wants. That shield's gone. You know,
yeah.
Like that.
Yeah, or straight Lord of the Rings style, dude, scales off a dragon.
Oh, yeah. Well, you said straight Lord of the Rings style. I immediately thought of Legolas surfing down the staircase.
Going back to bows.
Yeah, just straight back. No, I just thought shield. I'm like, cool. Yeah, you can surf.
Oh shit.
A shield surf action in combat. If you're near a vertical surface, it doubles your movement, man.
He said,
you just drop down the parapet.
Yeah.
I doubled my movement. Well, yeah, fall damage.
Yeah, roll. Speaking of which, fall damage, real quick before we move on, I feel like capping out fall damage is lame. I feel like if you fall 500 feet, you should just take whatever that equates to instead of capping it out 20 d6.
Oh, I just, if you ding over 250 feet, you're dead.
No,
I'm not even calculating the damage.
That works too.
Gravity is going to take effect, and I don't care if you have resistance to force damage. You are hitting the ground so fast.
That's so true. I like that too. Yeah. You just get smoked because it's like, at what point, like, you might be a level 20 adventurer, but like, fight gravity, bitch. Like, you're done.
It really does not matter. It is going to win. It has been around much longer than you, and it will be around much longer than you.
It depends on the spells you cast. The only thing I would say is like pass a certain fall threshold, because I think in D&D, falling in one turn is 500 feet. I want to say, because I remember looking it up because I want to do specific spells. Mm-hmm. But allowing certain things like, are you falling with an enemy? Yeah, do a contested athletics check to find out who hits the ground first. You know, like, I like the idea of like, I would calculate the 20d6. Well, past that for like, oh, you want to fall 500 feet? Okay. Like, all those die are coming into play, and any tool you have in your back pocket you want to do about it, go ahead. But the numbers are still the numbers, and you can give yourself resistance, and you might be able to do like a cheeky spell or something, but you're still hitting the ground hard, and you're probably creating difficult terrain where you land, just because you're... Good boy, Nox. You're doing great. But yeah, I do understand the, like, you fell that fast. Cool. But Also, I guess, again, in the campaign that we've been playing, there is, like, variable gravity. So that is a factor, but that's... There's still acceleration, Look, you're moving how fast towards what surface? You're a pancake now. Make a new character.
Yeah.
I think depending on circumstances, it could be ruled different way. But I do like... I think it'd also be kind of, like, interesting to know, like, oh, my character's dead, but like you are falling with somebody else, like what can I do to like take them with me, or like say you're falling with like a sorcerer or something, and they're like, I cast Featherfall, and you're like, fuck no, and you grab them, or you know, or something to do to do something like to restrain them or something, or like make it so that they fall first.
Ride down like a parachute. You just hold on to their neck, choke them out. They have to keep concentration. You know.
Yeah, and then you smash their head into the tree trunk at terminal velocity.
I mean, Featherfall. It's weird language on it because it says you don't take any damage, but you're still falling at, because again, if you're doing 6-second rounds, it's 10 feet a second because you move 60 feet down, which isn't slow.
Right, you're still like
that would still hurt.
Yeah.
You're just just swan dive the sorcerer's head into the ground.
It's still weird because it's 500 feet in 6 seconds. So Featherfall, you're not slowing yourself that much.
I find
it becomes 60 feet in per round.
My thought with Featherfall is like you fall faster, but then right before you hit the ground, I feel like you just like tap down. That's what I think of Featherfall. Like you fall slower, and then like at the very end, you just like touch down. Is the way I think of Featherfall, because you don't take any damage.
Well, I looked at Featherfall a lot when we were doing the Frost Trail campaign, because I fully planned on Dimension Dooring up with a hostage and casting Featherfall and then letting them go. But just I was just ready for it. I was fully ready to kill a lot of humans.
Oh my god!
But anyway, Featherfall is also reaction based. You have to cast Featherfall unless you're falling further than 500 feet. You have to cast Featherfall when you begin falling, unless the DM rules it differently. Gotcha. Like, I want to hold my action to cast Featherfall. Like, you can, but it's also using your reaction.
Gotcha.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure there is no rule that says you can't choose to use your action to do it before you do something or whatever, but that's normally the trigger for Featherfall, which was a bit strange, and I did have to change some things I wanted to do because of it. Because I did want to interrogate Axoff as he's falling to the planet. But you can't do that in a round because I could only Dimension Door so many feet and then be like, "Tell me where you hit the planet, you're dead." And it's like, oh, that was cool, man.
You just get immediately smoked.
Just crunch. All right, well, I'll make a new character. My bad, everybody.
All right.
Well, Featherfall targets 5 people, which I didn't.
Yeah, you could save your whole party aside from the rogue. Just let him try to uncanny dodge the fucking earth.
Yo, he said, watch this. The
door is high enough that you could teleport up and then Featherfall you all down. It is exactly...
You could, but what I wanted to do was interrogate him while falling and not cast Featherfall until I got my answers, and you do not have enough time to do that.
Oh, no, yeah. You'd be like,
again,
ding.
And then you kind of become Piggy from whatever that book's called. I can't remember.
Are you guys ready to go to flanking?
Yeah.
Okay.
Flanking with Piggy towards the planet. What was that book called?
Yeah. Well, you think of that? Was it the what was it? The rat, the orphan, and the something else?
No, it wasn't that one.
Okay. Flanking. So flanking an enemy is an incredible way to get the upper hand.
Lord of the Flies.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Flanking enemies is an incredible way to get the upper hand in a fight. However, the flanking mechanic where 2 creatures performing this tactic, both gaining advantage on all of their attacks, I feel like is far too powerful and can make dispatching creatures an easier feat if flanking be utilized effectively, because this ruling of flanking is being adjusted to a more appropriate scale. I think advantage is just like insane to give it out that easy, especially if you can like circle in a perimeter of a creature's melee range without them actually getting any opportunity to stop you. I think it's an incredibly insane ruling. So I have it so that based on the creature's size, more creatures can flank. However, the bonus is a +3. So it's medium creature, 2 creatures can conduct a flank, giving a +3 to their attack rolls. Large, I put 3 question marks. I actually have visuals, and you guys can kind of see. We can kind of talk about that. Size huge is definitely 3 creatures can conduct a flank, and then gargantuan 4 creatures can conduct a flank. So if you guys want to look at the Discord chat, as I pull this up for the stream, and I have the Oh, let me go ahead and adjust this real quick. Turn this off. Turn this on.
Well, I think you just made homie huge.
Yeah. So this would be the example of everyone's kind of like more traditional flanking, where you literally with a regular humanoid, you just get behind them. So I feel like that's pretty easily understandable. And then this one is the large. And so based on this, I feel like that works as a flank of 3, but I could also understand a ruling of a flank of 2. What do y'all think for the second image?
I think that's good. I just, with all of these, I can't help but see, and it kind of plays into something we talked about last time, is especially if you're the only combatant, in this case there's multiple, the creature would probably choose to square up with one of you, unless it's trying to split its focus. So I'd almost look at it as one person gets the advantage of flanking. And like in the first image, 2 people are getting the advantage of flanking with the large creature, because it would probably choose to contest one of them. Unless it has something where it could try to square up against, you know, like maybe it's so large, it has such a large weapon, it's going to physically block off 2 of them, or so as you're saying +3, maybe it has something where it's like, oh, it has its own ability to like square up with one of you, restrict to one of them is going to the advantage of flank. You know what I mean?
I think it's interesting though, because are you saying like only one gets the, like one of them, like for instance this first one, are you saying only one gets the flanking?
Yeah.
Yes, but it also, I wouldn't say medium creatures are restricted to one, because like if that same trio was around the medium creature, because that's where people ended up being, I would let 2 people get the advantage of flanking, but that one of the people there, which I'd probably let the enemy creature pick, or heaven forbid, and by heaven forbid I mean it will happen, the party member who's being flanked gets to pick 2, who it's squaring up to. But I'd probably let 2 people get the advantage of that flank.
Okay, so are you talking about for the large one where it's not?
I'm talking about for the medium even too.
Only one.
Like I'm pretty much.
Well, so
only I would say one. Pretty much for anything you have there, I'd say at least one of those creatures there wouldn't get the advantage of flanking.
So the reason why it makes sense in my mind where everyone would get the advantage of flanking is only because even if the creature is squared off on one creature in front, it is still actively cognizant of a creature behind it. And at any moment, like, so say like a creature behind it strikes out at it, now its attention is either off kilter or now trying to focus backwards, which would allow the person, even though it's in front of it, would still, I feel like, get that bonus, because it is also like it's playing to both of them. Because even though it's facing one person, they're getting struck from behind, so they have to kind of be like, oh shit, what's going on behind me? Or they at least have to be cognizant enough of like behind them or aware of that to where like the person in front of them isn't their main focus the whole time. So that's where I feel like it would benefit both creatures. And that I feel like in some way would make it mechanically easier than for you to like always be like worried about where's this mini facing and like how is it negating things. Because I feel like that would just be even more things a DM would have to, or a player would have to like remember. Whereas for this, the bonus is an advantage, which makes it a little bit more manageable, and then it kind of needs to be a little bit more streamlined.
Sure. If the focus there is streamlining and making it so it's like a square ruling, that makes a lot of sense.
Right, but I also understand what you're saying, where it's like, okay, you can definitely have that. So I think so.
You know me, I like making things complicated.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I know how you are. So would you guys say that large? Would you guys say that large is 3, or would you say it'd be for 2? I was going back and forth. I feel like it could be either way. So
I think 3 for sure. I mean, a large creature's a large creature.
Yeah, I think so too. And then
the way it works in 3.5 as well is both players get a +2 bonus as long as there's one player already engaged with the creature before you flank the creature.
So as long as one person's already engaging in melee,
and then you engage with that same creature, you can gain the flanking bonus because it's currently occupied. But then after that, like you were saying, both players can get that bonus because then it's suddenly being pincered by 2 of them.
Right.
I like that. That makes sense.
And then next would be huge, which blatantly, easily enough, 3. Yeah, diverge. You know, either right or split up attention 3 different ways. And then obviously gargantuan, you would be very easily 4. And because there's, you know, people working across for each other and able to kind of bring it into that. I will say I forgot actually to write out these rules because I I just forgot. But I will say I meant to. Let me go and pull this up. Let me go pull up Google Docs again. I meant to write out. There is a note for this one, and I did make it so that creatures with passive perception that is super high. And we can discuss what we think that'd be, or for instance, a creature like a beholder who has multiple eyes, or a creature with blind sense cannot be flanked in the sense of they are hyper aware and they are more alert than the average creature. Therefore, they're able to kind of break up their attention without foregoing any of their defense. I thought that a passive perception 16 would be I would think high enough to negate this, but I think maybe even 18 would be even better, because I would say generally most creatures like passive perception is like 10 to 14. Very rarely do they go above 15. So I feel like 15, 16 would be a good starting point, unless that's you guys think is too low.
No, I think 15 would be really good, because most of the time you're not going to deem that, and then even if you do, you could take into account stealth. If a creature has a higher stealth, their stealth modifier would negate from their passive perception or something, and that's DM discretion, obviously.
Yeah.
But having a passive perception of 15 means you have a significantly higher passive perception than most people are like trying to be stealthy in combat.
Right.
And I think the biggest class, I think obviously would get the advantages from these flanks, would be the rogue. So coming out of a hide from that, even if the creature has, blind sight, probably not. Beholder, probably not. Passive perception, sure, that makes plenty of sense to me. Where he's just stepping real quiet, and just comes out of there and does bonkers damage because it's a rogue. That makes sense to me. It's a rogue who already gets so many advantages, but also the +3 on that seems like something to reward that positioning, because anything to reward players working together to create a situation. That's always something you want to be like, yeah, you're a rogue rolling with advantage. Here's +3 to the roll too. Go at him, Tiger. Oh god, nat 20 shit. And then, oh what? Oh no.
Yeah.
Wait, how much are you doubling? Like you're tripling? Like you're maxing sneak attack? Oh shit.
Yeah, maxing sneak attack. He's using your modified rules. You forgot you gave him a flame dagger, so that's full. He's adding the other die.
He's just disintegrating a creature with his melee weapon. You're like,
you forgot you gave him a dagger of disintegrate earlier.
Yeah.
Just casual things you forget about.
Yeah.
He's beating him with a chair. No, not again.
Improvised weapon, sneak attack, chair, destroyer.
That'd be fun. Be a fun class.
Frying pan.
But yeah, I think that
shield and a weapon.
Because even briefly, I was looking up online, and people were saying like, yeah, honestly, flanking is such an easy thing to kind of like coordinate, or it's pretty quickly you can get into it. And for advantage also doubles your crit chance, which is a big thing that I realized too, because you're rolling twice instead of just once. Whereas this is just a plus, just flat kind of. Here's a little bit of a bonus. And I think this won't get too out of hand. And I think it also helps. I think this also kind of helps players in a way too, because players can start to get beat down if they're fighting like a horde or something. If everyone's having creatures on them,
kobolds would be a nightmare.
This motherfucker with kobolds, bro. This motherfucker is kobolds.
I was about to say the same thing with kobolds. Yeah,
because
I think kobolds, even if you use this rule with enemies, I think I would say pack tactics is already in its language, kind of describing flanking to a degree, just because it's more. There's so many of them. There's kind of they just work together naturally with their sharpened sticks and spells, or my kobolds always have spells, so they just run up like shanking you with a spear a lot.
Yeah, that would be brutal, man. You just run into a group of them, and I think, but that also like adds the diversity of like you're no longer just fighting one large beast. It makes it more beneficial, because it makes it more beneficial usually as a DM to have a bunch more things so your players can't target them. But then it's like, oh, well, now I have this small group of enemies over here, so 2 of these bandits are going to go target this player, but a couple are going to go over here. So the other, your players are suddenly starting to worry about, okay, how do we want to split up the party so we're not getting flanked by groups of people?
Go ahead, yeah. I was just going to say the same thing with realistically, I would imagine, I have not been in medieval combat, but I would imagine you see a large amount of enemies, you might circle up to prevent flanks, and people can cover each other. And so mechanically, especially everyone gets in a tight circle, and the wizards, of course, probably flying, but everyone who's relevant to that gets in a tight circle to negate the flanking advantage to some degree. Maybe that could still happen, but if everyone's circled up, that would make sense. It's just players being aware of the rule and the kind of makes that situation like, oh yeah, let's get together real quick. Let's tighten it up. Let's put our backs to a wall
and that
swing.
And that also with the interseed reaction and those reactions we're talking about, where you can kind of also like work off each other within 5 feet, is also, you know, makes this making piles, you know, makes characters working next to each other a lot more beneficial.
And it makes it really good when you have the Kobold Shaman then cast Fireball.
Exactly.
They're all incentivized, grouped up, and it's going to be a lot of fun.
Or the wizard doesn't give a shit about his friends, and he just does also cast Fireball in the group, and everyone's just on fire.
Hey, I asked for consent before I set
him on fire. You got that resistance, bro.
Yeah.
You tell him to fire away. Yeah. But also, we talked about it last time, how a lot of time in combat, it'll get to the point where 5 people die around one stump. With flanking, you're not going to want to have 5 people around one stump anymore, so it gives more incentives to the players to move around and split themselves up or split up enemies, so that you're not just like, okay, well, I'm getting attacked by 5 people. It doesn't matter if you're a barbarian. If you're getting shanked by 5 people who can flank you, it's more beneficial to disengage and try and split them up.
Which, speaking of disengage, we also, with one of the homebrewed reactions, making disengage at least negate 1 opportunity of attack, which I have up on the screen, where that kind of lets you move a little bit more. And it doesn't fully negate, because if obviously creatures are trying to go in for a flank, you'll probably take at least 1 opportunity of attack, but at least helps negate some of that damage, lets you move a little bit more.
For sure. Yeah. I think another thing, too, about the kind of just about the language with the stump thing, when we're adding the flanking rule, I think then there is kind of a big macro part of combat that kind of comes up, which I think sometimes in combat, you're in combat, and the situation dictates what's happening. I think there's a certain point where, like, with all these flanking rules, with all the movement, with all the kind of versatility given, there's kind of a, whether I think the players are conscious of it or not, there is kind of a language of, oh, am I being defensive right now, and do I need to shore up where I'm at, make sure where I'm standing's good, and just stem the tide? Or is this offensive, and I'm going to run around and get flanks, get sneaky maneuvers, coordinate with friends, and keep the combat moving, because that's where mechanically this is going to be better for me based off, you know, the amount of creatures, the amount of, you know, how dangerous the situation is, what the layout, whatever. There's like a whole, and of course I'm saying this without having run it, but I think people realize at a certain point, like, oh, we are going to either hold this door or we're going to explode out of this door, right? It really depends on what you're looking at.
Yeah, so I think it sets a little bit more battle strategy in, rather than I'm going to do this, and this, and this is what combat is going to be. It's like, oh yeah, well, this combat, like you're saying, yeah, it dictates based off of the design of the battle you're doing now. Suddenly makes some rules that were beneficial to you. You're like, oh yeah, flanking is a great rule for us when we're fighting like one large troll, but then you go into a small group and flanking suddenly sucks for you. Or taking cover, you round the corner and there's a bunch of dudes behind a wall firing arrows, and you're like, fuck.
Yeah. Don't you hate it when that happens every other combat?
Every other combat, man.
I open the door, ballista, you know, like,
Boom!
Yeah. Make a dexterity saving throw, not to avoid it, but to make sure you're not pinned to the wall.
And then I think the last topic we'll have time for tonight, if you want to go over conditions, just real quick, conditions that we want to go ahead and kind of adjust or modify, or what we like or don't like. I know, Logan, for sure you have some, so go ahead and you can start this conversation off.
Poisoned. Poison's a dumb condition. It has 1 effect. You don't take any lingering effects from it. There's no custom thing to poison. You take disadvantage on all of your things, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
I think that poison itself as a condition should be like, base poison does this. Disadvantage on everything is not bad, but then adding more things that poison can do, so having monsters that do certain effects with their poison or something, because it just is like, oh yeah, man, this demon poisoned you, versus this one dude with some random rusty knife shivved you and you got tetanus and you're poisoned now. But neither of those do anything different. Poison just feels like a harder exhaustion. Like, you get more levels of exhaustion in 1 effect of poison, but it's temporary.
Exactly.
Right. I spent some time with poison, as I said earlier, and one of the things I added was the death saving throws. But another thing I added, which is, you're right, I think when I first stated it to you guys, it was a fixed number, but it is definitely a sliding scale on, like, if you fail your roll, if you don't shrug off this condition by, you know, excreting snake venom from your blood, or however it's going, you know, you're going to take damage. It's poison. You are poisoned. Turns out it's bad. And,
well, that's
and you're right, like, the shanky blade probably isn't going to affect you in combat, but it might become a role-playing thing. You might need to get medicine later or something like that. Like, poison doesn't have to be combat. It could be you're poisoned, and guess what? It's going to suck a bit today. It's going to suck worse tomorrow. It's going to suck worse the day after that. Until you're able to do something.
It should definitely be expanded upon. And I was actually really surprised when poisoned, like, never actually mentioned any, like, additional damage. Because I always thought, like, if you get stabbed with something, you take, like, damage, but then you're also poisoned. And I usually, like, my initial thought was, like, oh, you'll take, like, reoccurring damage, and that, like doesn't happen. But I feel like making a table or making certain poisons do different poisoned conditions would be actually really cool. I agree.
I think poison, depending on the poison, should cause other conditions for certain. I think certain poisons, again, this is getting to like a really high level of poison that either the party can use and most certainly the enemies can use.
Yeah.
For instance, you get poison and also you're under the effect of paralysis. You know, like things can get pretty bonkers, especially like poison. There's no reason a poison can also temporarily blind you.
Right.
You know,
exactly.
Yeah. Again, you have to be careful because poison's initial thing is very fundamentally nerfs your character, so you have to be careful. Like, oh, you're also blind. Well, which one are they going to be? Your character's going to be rolling for now? I would say roll to get rid of the poison that takes care of the blindness to some degree. You know, just so you don't have to roll to get rid of two conditions and the poison's gone, but you're still blind. You know, you don't realize you're punching the barbarian and like you're about to get team killed.
Well, I think
things like that.
To kind of build off this, I really feel like a lot of times too, like there's a lot of cool conditions in D&D that are very infrequently used. I feel like I think poison's a big one, but like we were saying, it's not really diverse. It's just like a big like smack in the face. I really like the blinding condition, but that is very far and few between that you actually get to use that. And I feel like a lot of them you really don't use all that often. Grappled you probably use pretty often, but I think that it'd be cool just to even expand upon them and give certain things almost like they almost interlace sometimes where in regards to certain things.
Oh, for sure. I also like certain creatures have these, which I don't think are in the conditions book, but a lot of creatures have like, oh, they do this unique haunting thing. You get this haunted death stare by the whatever the monster might be, and it does a preset condition.
Oh, that's pretty. Yeah,
well,
yeah.
Why not give it its own unique thing it's doing to you?
I agree.
Know? Like, why not give us like, oh, you're not frightened, you're haunted, and it does different things to you mechanically.
Right.
To kind of communicate like, oh, like not only are you like kind of scared you can't move towards it, but also it's gonna do double damage to you. Like depending on like the type of creature. Obviously, play with those numbers, but you know, creatures. I think especially if you're making a big monster or you're making a unique enemy, make it have unique conditions it gives, and then of course if you like that condition, put it in your pocket, use it next time. You know. Yeah. Or give the players the ability to give it to enemies.
Yeah, and I think that'd definitely be a cool way. I think that's like my favorite part about like creature building and like like just making monsters is like going and making flavor things and just like making unique things like that parties like the players haven't faced normally. Like you use mechanics of D&D, but then you expand upon them, make them unique to the situation.
One of my favorites that I read on, I think it was a 3.5 monster, but it was called like the Boneyard. And it had this condition that if it was grappled, you had to roll, I think it was a contested constitution check, and you had to fail it twice. Fail it the first time, you take like 46 bludgeoning damage as your bones start leaving your body. And if you failed it the second time, you instantly die because your bones are ripped out of your body. And it adds like temporary hit points to itself as it adds more bones to itself because it's a crazy boneyard. And it's also like CR like 23. Like it isn't like fifth level adventures, like, but having conditions like that are especially like for one, something that's going to instantly kill someone, being two contested rolls have to get simultaneously, and against a high level party, you have everyone in the party that can do something about it. Like even the person being restrained to do something about it. Yeah. But like having that threat of immediate death for like a huge set piece monster like that is a lot of fun because you got to rip bones out, you know. But
you can even their skull out of their head.
Well, that's another. I am not shy about saying my favorite monster ever for D&D 5e is the Shadow, because it does a unique thing too, where it drains strength, which is just a really fun thing to do, especially to a lower level party. Yeah. Because it's like, oh shit, what, my stats are going down? That's scary. Exactly. I had numbers on my page, on my character sheet, and now you're affecting that. I'm used to you messing with the HP, now you're affecting this number. You know, like that's not necessarily a condition, but you can always make it a condition.
Hell yeah.
Who is making a condition that can be shrugged off.
Yeah, I think that's the part of the thing with conditions too that some monsters have is it takes away agency from players sometimes. Sleep is pretty bad about it. Paralysis is bad about it sometimes.
Stunned.
To where it's like stunned, you're like, oh, I do one turn, I fail the save, and then I'm literally just I'm stuck here. I can't have any other players come and help me to do anything with the save. Like there's nothing you can do about it. Sometimes you are just under the effects. And so then you're sitting in combat, comes back around to your turn, you make the save, you fail it, you sit for another 20 minutes, you make the save, you fail it, and like
right.
Well, being able to have characters affect conditions could be helpful too.
Right, like letting someone in the party help you would be a huge thing. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and that's I think it's shitty to be like, yo, your entire rest of the combat is based on like your first roll, and it's like, yo, it's, dice is really fun because adds like that chance of things as is life, But I think it is kind of shitty to just like completely negate a character's entire like turns in combat, and that's why I'm gonna go through and kind of modify some things. I think that the next edition of D&D they're releasing something called Dazed, which is another condition. It's like stunned but less, but like they still have stunned in the game, which is weird. Like, but the dazed condition is basically kind of like it's kind of like slowed, where like you can make an action or a bonus action, not both, or you can move, or use your action, not like bonus action or react. Yeah. Like there's things like that, and I think that's what I want to kind of change up. Where like stunned does like. It limits your action pool and your movement, but doesn't just destroy it, because that just makes like as a DM with your monsters, if you have a one creature and a monk goes stunned, you're just like, okay, y'all have fun just destroying this pillow. I'm gonna leave, like or as a player, it's like
I'm gonna go get a coffee. Let me know how much damage you do.
Yeah, exactly. As a player, you're like, oh great, now I'm just grounded here and I can't do anything, and it's like it just makes things so frustrating.
For dazed, it would be a cool mechanic if you get dazed and then stunned. So stun is still the same, and you're only stunned for a turn, like it has it capped off, but it takes a second to get there.
Oh yeah, like another fail. For the most part, I like that.
Yeah, you're not gonna get clocked and be totally done, but if you get clocked into dazed, and then you're like, I only got one per turn, but then you take another really big hit, then yeah, you're gonna spend a single turn just doing nothing because you got like double shot. So
I like that ramping effect. That's really cool.
Me too. I think more conditions should have things like that. Like I think, again, as you mentioned, paralysis, which I do like, but it is a similar thing. Like anything that's going to be big enough to, it's like, hey, your entire next probably series of turns, if we're being honest, are gone. It should have a precursor, like some prerequisite, some first strike that's like, it's going to lower your chances. Maybe now you're more susceptible to the paralysis ability, but there's something that happened first and you're kind of aware of it and you can do something about it.
Well, I like the paralyzed condition mainly for, like not in combat, but for like RP stuff. Like you're like paralyzed. I feel like for RP is a great condition, but you throw that in the combat, you're just like, okay.
No, I agree. RP in combat, I feel like should have different rulings and things like that. Because, for instance, I have no problem, stunning somebody role-playing wise, like out the gate. Like those things, I think, obviously, our DM's discretion are fine.
Yeah.
But like, I think this obviously is a great one.
I think
freezing a player and then monologuing to them to give them.
Oh
the
yeah,
that's the only way you're able to monologue,
it works.
Man.
Yeah, you have to.
You can't interrupt me. Fuck you. I gotta say what I gotta say.
Yeah, someone sets on pressure plate. A bunch of ballistas shoot everyone. They're all paralyzed for exactly. See how long this is. 2 minutes and 37 seconds as he explains his plan for once.
Well, just like
and then of course somebody contests the roll and the barbarian throws a sword, but you had that minute.
Yeah.
You had the opportunity.
There.
Yeah. Well, I think that's what I like about petrification too. Petrification is a ramping condition. You get you start, you get half, and then you're petrified. It's not like I don't think anything in D&D can necessarily petrify you in one go. You always get one chance to shrug it off. I'm pretty sure. Obviously,
I believe so. Yeah.
I think you can obviously home rule, but like that'd be kind of shitty to be like, oh, you're just petrified. Have fun. It's like okay. I like the fact that you
agree. It would be shitty unless that's the type of game you're running, as we said with like the hardcore mode.
Always variants, yeah.
Because especially if you're going Gygaxian. Yeah, if you're going like to old school, like back when it was called like what, swords and Swords and Shields or something. Like the first game, the Chainmail, when it was called Chainmail. Like the game was like, yeah, my level 12 adventurer steps on a rock wrong. It's like, well, your ankle's broken, and now there's a kobold in the trees who's just gonna drop down with a spear. Instant killed, by the way. Oh, you set off a fire in the cave. You never thought about the way it's gonna vent out. Idiot. And what asphyxiates. Yeah.
Idiot.
You know. Yeah, like, but if you wanted a game like that, yeah, you could always homebrew some of these conditions, which, again, we spoke about 5e being somewhat beginner-friendly. You can always make things more dangerous, but also give people more agency is great. Taking away agency to a degree, if that is the game you're running, is also fine, but obviously, talk to your players and make sure they know what that means, too.
Exactly. I think that's honestly, for you... And that's why I like about Session 0. Session 0 is when you should really like explain homebrew rules and kind of get the idea for things. So, but I will say with that, we will go ahead and conclude our session tonight, as we have kind of touched base on everything we wanted to hit for conditions of combat. Well, very nice, yeah. That's one thing I love about D&D is just like it's just how much you can just play with things and how you can just manipulate it and make it work for your thing. And sometimes you make things work for one setting, another time, like for instance, you're going to add poison and stuff, and in other settings you just you rule it differently because you want things to mean more in different areas. But
now in both settings, there's just a lot of poison being added.
Yeah,
that's for sure.
Yeah. Speaking of which,
we should add the optional rule for our stars home game. Just saying for good.
Oh, we'll talk about that for sure.
We should.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you want to see conditions go Super Saiyan, go ahead and tune in on Sunday as we get poisoned to death in the Redmire Hunt arc.
Allegedly,
we'll see. Connor likes to allude. He likes to, he's like, I do not admit anything, but he alludes to things, and so we have a pretty good idea. But thank you so much for hanging out with us tonight in the tavern and kind of hanging out, being just hanging with the discussion. And yeah, we will go ahead and catch all of you next time. And yeah, if you're looking for some poison in the swamp, Sunday we will be continuing our Redmire Hunt arc. So hopefully we'll see you there. Okay, all right. We'll hopefully catch you there. Y'all have a wonderful rest of your night. All right, dude. Hey, I lost my mouse again. This is the second Tavernside time.
Have a wonderful rest of your night.
Wait, hold on.